Hi, it's Christopher the Bronze Age Nerd, and remember, when it comes to spec, knowing is half the battle. Hey guys, I just want to welcome you to my first ever spec pick video. Now, I never set out to do any of these, but I have been asked by several people what my spec picks are, so I decided to do a series of these focusing on comics that I know and understand to give you an idea of what I look for when I'm specking on comics. Now, before I get to the picks, I just want to caution everybody that I don't really recommend specking on books unless you have disposable income. This is something that I think everybody should treat as gambling on a stock market or something similar like that. Of course, it's your money, you can do whatever you want with it, but I just want everybody to use a little bit of caution. Definitely think about it before you go waste a bunch of money. I don't want you to run to eBay and buy 20 copies of every book I recommend because you think it's a surefire deal. That's just not how this works. Basically, act responsibly and do whatever you feel comfortable with. All right, so I'm going to start out with what I kind of call a bonus pick here. I'll get to the list of 5 in a second, but if you have a little extra money, the comic that I would really recommend buying, if you're going to go after any G.I. Joe comic and you feel like G.I. Joe 1 is just out of your reach, is G.I. Joe 21. G.I. Joe 21 is an infamous comic. It's known as the silent issue, and like the name states there, it's basically because there's no dialogue in the whole comic. It is also the first appearance of Storm Shadow. And Storm Shadow is Snake Eye's clan brother from the Arashikage clan. Basically, he's the second most popular ninja in all of G.I. Joe. He starts off as a villain, a Cobra agent, and he ends up becoming an ally and friend of Snake Eyes. But it's a very important issue, and it's one you should definitely go after. Now, for G.I. Joe 21, if you're going for graded comics, I'll just caution you, according to Go Collect, the most recent FMV for a 9.8 is $1,500. So we're definitely talking about a high roller comic here. However, a 9.0 would only set you back $280. And I will say even lower grade comics for this particular issue do carry some value. I have a 7.5 and an 8.5, both of which are actually worth a decent amount. Just to give an estimated raw value, since Key Collector does do some research and arrive at some values, I'm just go ahead and use their research and say that their high value mark is one that we can trust for this. And they say that a high grade copy should go for $230. So definitely one to check out. I would say this is probably the second most desirable G.I. Joe comic there is. However, that said, it's a bit pricey, so it's just a bonus high roller pick. Let's actually talk about the 5 picks. All right, so first up, let's talk about G.I. Joe number 11. It's a pretty low number issue in the classic A Real American Hero run. G.I. Joe 11 has a slew of first appearances. It's the first appearance of Doc, Gung-Ho, Snow Job, and Airborne. But probably the most important first appearance in it is Destro. Destro is one of the most popular characters when it comes to the Cobra side of the G.I. Joe equation. You know, the blue lasers to their red. Basically, Destro's first cameo appearance, or first appearance in cameo, depending on how you want to phrase it, takes place in G.I. Joe number 11. Now, it's absolutely worth noting that Destro's first full appearance is in G.I. Joe 14. And personally, I think that's the more desirable issue for a Destro appearance. It's also a little bit more expensive right now, so something to keep in mind. Now, interestingly enough, this comic's under the radar enough that Go Collect doesn't have an FMV value for it at any of the grade levels. That doesn't mean that there haven't been any sales, it just means that there's not enough sales for them to create a fair market value based on the sales data they have. Key Collector does have raw values for this comic, and they value the high grade at $12. I think this is a fantastic comic. I pick it up whenever I can find it. There is a second printing too, so be aware of that. But it's got great Bob Camp art. If you're not familiar with Bob Camp, he's a legendary illustrator. Definitely worth checking out. I actually had the pleasure of getting one of my copies signed, which was a really fun experience. And I definitely think this is a great issue for you to spec on. All right, for pick number 2, we talked about G.I. Joe 21 earlier in the list. Well, now we're going to talk about G.I. Joe 22. G.I. Joe 22, the follow-up issue, features 2 major first appearances. The first one is Roadblock, who's a fan favorite G.I. Joe, and the second one, probably the more important one, is the first appearance of Duke. Duke basically became the leader figure for the G.I. Joe team. He's possibly the second most beloved G.I. Joe character after Snake Eyes. He's certainly a character that a lot of fans identified with. In fact, this character is pretty much the analog to Optimus Prime for the G.I. Joe team. Don't believe me? Well, consider this. Duke was planned to be killed off in an extremely similar fashion to Optimus Prime in the animated movie for G.I. Joe, But after that scene happened to traumatize pretty much the youth of America, they decided to have him strangely just become comatose and recover at the end of the movie. But they planned to kill him just like they planned to kill Optimus Prime. That's how popular this character is. Now, a good reason to spec on this comic is that there is some sort of casting buzz. John Cena made an obscure tweet with an image of Duke. So there's been some rumors that maybe he was cast or was willing to entertain the idea of playing Duke in a movie. Duke is definitely one of the most popular characters, and if we start to see G.I. Joe films, there's no question that Duke will make an appearance. And I think that Duke and Roadblock are both great characters to go after for G.I. Joe first appearances. Now, when it comes to the money, if you're looking for a graded 9.8, you're going to be paying $450 according to Go Collect FMV. However, it definitely scales down quickly from there. And if you wanted, like, say, a 9.0 copy, you could only pay $46 FMV for one of those. But here's the thing. The Key Collector high value for a raw comic is just $15. I think there's plenty of room for this book to climb, and I made sure to grab a copy of it because I never had one for my personal collection. I'm definitely on the hunt for more. I've been hunting for it for the last year and haven't found it in the wild, so definitely something to keep in mind. All right, we've talked about a fan favorite Joe. Let's talk about a fan favorite Cobra agent. Let's talk about Zartan. The next comic on this list is G.I. Joe 25, which is the first full appearance of Zartan. He does make a cameo appearance in G.I. Joe 24, so keep that in mind. It's also the first appearances of some Joes. We got Deep Six and Mutt and Junkyard, the K9 unit. Plus, it's the first appearance of the Dreadnoks. You have the first appearance of Ripper, Torch, Buzzer, and Cutter in this issue, so plenty of villains and first appearances to definitely keep in mind. And that's the thing about these G.I. Joe comics. Probably because of the way they introduced action figure appearances kind of around the same time that a wave of figures was going to launch, you had a ton of first appearances in a comic at once. So most of these are triple or quadruple keys for that reason. Zartan is really popular. He's on the Mount Rushmore of Cobra faces. You basically have Cobra Commander, you have Destro, you have Baroness, and then right behind him would be Zartan. Now, this is also kind of a pricier 9.8. If you're looking for a 9.8 graded copy from CGC, you're looking at $375. Now, that does scale down. So if you're looking for just a 9.0, you can get one for $60. And Key Collector lists this as a high grade copy for $20. So after you go for that Destro, you might want to look for the Zartan. It's another great Cobra spec. All right, for our fourth pick, we're going to talk about another one that again has multiple first appearances. This one has the first Tomax and the first Xamot. It also has the first Footloose. And for the reason why it's landing on my list, it's also the first appearance of Flint. Now, Flint's kind of an interesting character. He's not necessarily one of the most popular G.I. Joes. He is sort of second fiddle to Duke, but he's landing on this list for a very specific reason. Earlier this year, G.I. Joe 32 exploded in value overnight. An otherwise worthless comic with kind of a bad cover just launched into the stratosphere. Why did that happen? Amazon announced that they were going to bring a brand new streaming show with Lady J as the star. And who's always connected to Lady J in the comics and the cartoon and all of G.I. Joe fiction? Flint. So wherever Lady J goes, Flint follows. So of course, there's a really good chance that Flint would make his way or at least be mentioned in a show starring Lady J. Now, frankly, most people probably track down this issue because they want the leader of the Crimson Guardsmen, which is Tomax and Xamot, the identical twin brothers. They were kind of a very popular staple in the cartoon, for example. But really, I think the best reason to go after this comic is for Flint. And the good news is this is not a very expensive comic to go after. There's currently no Go Collect FMV, which means it's not seeing a lot of action. And Key Collector only listed as a high grade $10 book. And I've seen it high grade in bins for $5, no problem. You can easily find this book for a cheap price. So if the Lady J comic snuck up on you and you can't find a copy because everyone's sending them off to get graded or they're selling them for ridiculous prices, maybe hunt down this Flint first appearance. So tell you what, I'll talk about one newer G.I. Joe comic, and that comic is G.I. Joe 226. Now, G.I. Joe eventually switched over many years later to an IDW run. They were originally with Marvel, they went to issue 155, and then they ended up continuing that run with the same writer, Larry Hama, taking over at IDW. And these comics have been running for a good number of years now, and they're not quite as popular as the classic run. However, there are some popular characters that have come from this run and some cool storylines, and one of those characters that's really worth taking a look at is Don Moreno. Don Moreno first appears in G.I. Joe 226. and she eventually becomes the first female Snake Eyes. Now, I don't really want to get too much into female versions of male characters. That's a whole nother topic, but it's important to remember that many of them are very popular. Supergirl, Batgirl, Spider-Woman, etc. The list goes on. There are lots of popular versions that are basically a female version of a male character. For better or worse, or whether or not that's a good idea, they do become popular characters, and Dawn was no exception. She actually became very popular pretty quickly. And she's the female Snake Eyes. After Snake Eyes dies in the comics, which, you know, doesn't last long because it's comics, she does become Snake Eyes. She just takes over as Snake Eyes. So definitely an interesting character. The cool thing about this comic is the print run was tiny. According to Comichron, they estimate that this comic had a print run of just 7,688. An absolutely tiny print run for a first appearance of what could end up being a major character later on. Now, there are two covers for this comic to look out for. There's the A cover, and there's actually my favorite cover, which is the B cover, which is an action figure variant, but it's a pretty cool action figure variant because it's Cobra Commander. It's not like some nameless or minor Joe character. It's actually one of the major characters from the entire series. If Snake Eyes were to ever die in any new properties they were going to have, definitely look for Dawn Moreno to step in as the new Snake Eyes. And that's what makes this spec very interesting. Now, GoClick does list an FMV for this comic. 9.8 will only run you $65. And Key Collector lists the high as $65. So I think they might be going off the graded copies for this one. And I'll tell you, this comic is tricky to find in a raw condition, and I don't think many people are selling it graded, probably because they're holding on to it waiting for something to happen. But remember, there's not that many out there. Now, there are a lot of other great G.I. Joe comics to spec on out there. There's plenty. This is just my list of ones that I think are interesting, that didn't have too much of a buy-in, and definitely have room to grow. So if you're interested in following along, I will be doing more videos about specs, and they're all going to be themed lists like this in some way, shape, or form. You know, I'm going to do one on the X-Men. I'm going to do one on Hulk. Definitely some cool stuff coming. I really hope you enjoyed watching along. I just want to remind you that I do have a Ko-fi if you're interested in supporting the channel. Now, Ko-fi is a donation type service where you can donate whatever amount you want, and all the proceeds from that do go into the production of this channel, something to keep in mind. So if you're interested in supporting the channel, that's one place you can go do that. I want to thank everybody for watching this video, and I just want to remind you, hey, read comics every day. Knowing is half the battle.